The sky over Grimhold was the colour of old parchment, dry, cracked, and heavy with the weight of unspoken things. Sergeant Merrick Voss stood at the edge of the grain fields, his boots half buried in dust that hadn't tasted rain in weeks. In the distance, Mill Complex 9 loomed like a dead colossus, its smokestacks silent, its lights flickering in strange, arrhythmic pulses. He adjusted his helmet and glanced back at his squad. 4 troopers. Just 4. Corporal Lyra Dankin, rifle slung, data slate in hand, smart, curious, too curious, maybe. Trooper Hulvan Ricks, twitchy, pale-skinned, a city boy who hated open fields. Jork and Mel, quiet types, did what they were told, trusted their sergeant to keep them alive. Voss didn't like this. They weren't equipped for recon, let alone cleanup, but orders were orders. Grimhold fed 6 Imperial sectors. Losing one of its mills was a big enough deal to send them in without backup. He clicked his Vox. Static hissed back. Command, this is Sergeant Voss. We've reached Complex 9. No visual on personnel. We'll proceed inside for inspection. Silence. Voss scowled. Lyra tapped at her slate. We're in a blind spot, she muttered. Local interference. Could be the mill's signal boosters down. Or someone turned it off, Voss finished grimly. They stepped through the gate. The mill's entrance was ajar, and rusted chains hung loose on the fence. A warning sign blinked on and off. Authorized personnel only. Mechanicus code 991 Violet. Someone had scratched deep grooves into the metal underneath. The hallway inside smelled like rot and lubricant. Grain dust thickened the air, swirling in low spirals. No bodies, no blood, just nothing. Ricks wiped his eyebrow. Feels like a tomb. Voss didn't disagree. They moved through the loading bay first. Empty crates, forklifts sitting idle, conveyor belts still ran. Slow, groaning, but there was no workers, no security servitors. Lyra scanned one of the control panels and frowned. Logs show full output over the last 4 days, she said. No interruptions, no shift changes, and no logout times. Voss raised an eyebrow. So either someone worked 100 hours straight, or the logs are lying, she finished. He didn't like either answer. Down the main corridor, they found the first real clue, a narrow office, door forced open, walls smeared with something too dark to be grease. A work jacket lay across the desk. Inside one of the drawers, Voss found a pocket journal. He flipped it open. The last entry was short. Day 97. The others are gone. It said it needs more. It spoke to me. Through the grain. I think it's still hungry. Voss closed the book, jaw tight. We've got madness, he muttered. Millworker, cracked, maybe killed the rest. Maybe they're buried under the grain. Jork turned, his voice low. Sarge, you might want to see this. They followed him to the silo access door. The hatch had been sealed tight with a crude weld. Someone had scorched a strange shape into the door's surface. A circle with a line through it and 9 teeth around the edge. Emperor's bones, Rix whispered. That ain't Mechanicus. No, Lyra said. Her voice had gone thin. That's older. She knelt by the hatch, running a gloved hand over the mark. There are stories, back from the Dark Age, about food machines that ran too well, ones that learned to cook. People. Voss cut her off. That's fairy tale garbage. This is a malfunctioning plant. We need to find the central processor and shut it off. We'll call in a Mechanicus sweep after that. Still, his stomach turned as he looked at that symbol. It felt wrong, like it was staring back. They moved deeper into the complex. Down one corridor, they found the grain chute, a tunnel where harvested wheat travelled to be cleansed, pressed, and converted into nutrient paste. The floor was slick with moisture. Not water, something thicker. Voss crouched, dipped a finger, sniffed. Smells like iron, he muttered. Rix turned green. Don't say that. Something banged from above. All 5 guns turned skyward, but it was only a loose pipe. Or maybe a gear shifting. But it didn't sound mechanical. It sounded alive. Voss straightened. We keep moving. Full circuit sweep. Then we call this in. We're not dying over a broken oven. They reached the heart of the mill 30 minutes later. Engine 17. It stood 4 stories tall. A towering, rounded structure of bronze and black steel, covered in tubes, conveyor shafts, hatches, and pistons. Lights blinked along its base in no pattern. The control altar at the front pulsed with a slow red heartbeat. Lyra approached first. There's no operator, she said, brushing off dust. But it's still processing data. Look. She tapped her slate. It's cycling through recipe logs. High volume consumption. But the nutrient sources aren't standard. Meaning? It's not just grain it's processing. Behind them, a sudden low hum filled the chamber. A voice crackled from an old vox horn on the wall, broken, garbled, but still understandable. Don't leave me empty. Everyone froze. The hum faded. Voss didn't speak for a long moment. Then, no more poking around, Lyra. Shut this thing down now. She nodded, but her hands trembled. As she worked, Voss looked back toward the door. Through the swirling dust and dim light, he thought he saw movement, a shadow behind the glass, something tall. His head turned, and it was gone. Behind him, the vox crackled again. Feed me, please. Voss raised his rifle and muttered a prayer he hadn't said in years. This wasn't a broken machine. This was something else, something that remembered what hunger felt like. The corridors seemed narrower now. Sergeant Merrick Voss led the way with his rifle up, boots crunching over scattered grain. Behind him, Lyra typed furiously on her data slate, lips tight. Rix muttered prayers under his breath, eyes darting to every dark corner. No one spoke of what they'd just heard, the machine's voice, but it hung in the air like static. No logic, no reason, just hunger in mechanical form. They should have called in the Mechanicus. They should have left, but they couldn't raise command, not anymore. Voss turned into a processing hall. Rows of nutrient vat pipes, twisted like intestines, across the ceiling. Beneath them, mixing tables overflowed with pulp, not rotten, but strange, thick, warm. It smelled like spiced meat, though they hadn't brought any cattle through this sector in decades. Check the log feeds again, Voss ordered. Lyra tapped into a console by the wall, face lit by green flickers, still recording full productivity. Says it's processed over 20 metric tons in the last 3 days. From what? Rix asked. There's no grain shipments locked. Where's it getting all the material? A soft grinding noise echoed through the wall, like something chewing. Then the screen flickered. Surveillance footage appeared. Grain hall, corridor, silo. Then another sector, the central processing floor, the same one they just left. Voss leaned closer. The footage zoomed in automatically, focused on the main belt, and there, clearly, grotesquely, was a man, naked, eyes glazed, walking, willingly, towards the hopper. 2 servo arms extended like welcoming hands, and he stepped into their grip. Rix cursed. Emperor, did he? The hopper closed, then shook violently, then stopped. The screen glitched. Lyra froze. This isn't old footage, she whispered. This is live. Voss's jaw clenched. How long until that console goes dark too? Soon, she muttered. Whatever's in that core is rewriting everything. Machines don't think. This one's learning. Another room, another hallway. They moved faster now. Voss felt the pressure building in his chest. Not fear, not quite, not yet, but the kind of unseen a soldier learns to trust. The instinct that tells you when you're walking into a trap, even your boots haven't touched the wire yet. They entered the cafeteria next. Tables were overturned, trays scattered, no bodies, no signs of struggle. But in one corner, a hollow projector was still running, on loop. It played a repeating ad for protein paste. A smiling worker waved to the camera as steam poured through the vat beside him. Rix turned away. That smile ain't right. He looks like someone peeled it on. Voss gave a sharp hand signal. Stack up. Next sector. They passed into the hallway, labelled cold storage, but it was warm, almost humid. The storage units lined the walls, metal cabinets, 10 feet tall and just as wide. Doors hissed with recycled pressure. Voss opened the first, empty. Second, empty. Third. A worker sat inside, legs folded, eyes wide, alive, but wrong. His mouth hung open in a silent scream, and his chest rose and fell in slow, unnatural rhythm. Wires ran from his neck into the walls. Rix backed away, gagging. He's plugged in. Lyra scanned him. Life signs minimal. Brain activity shows looped signal. He's dreaming, but not naturally. It's being forced. Forced by what? She didn't answer. Voss moved closer. Why keep him alive? That's when they heard it. A whisper. It didn't come from the man's mouth. It came from the walls. I keep the flavors rich. Rix raised his rifle. Nope. Nope. We're not staying here. The storage cabinet suddenly hissed. Steam vented. The man inside twitched violently. Once, twice, and then he went still. Voss grabbed Lyra. We're done here. Back to the main sector. We disable this whole facility. I'm not letting anyone else end up in one of these goddamn lockers. They turned to go, and the lights cut out. Total black. The only sound, the slow, wet sliver of grain moving in unseen conveyor belts. Flashlights now, Voss barked. Beams flicked on, but the hallway was unfamiliar. The exit they'd used moments ago was gone, replaced by another corridor they'd entered from. Pipes twisted along the ceiling like veins. Lyra's slate blinked red. This isn't the map I uploaded, she whispered. The mill had changed. Rix's flashlight beam swept the floor and landed on drag marks, long, deep grooves. Something had been pulled down the corridor, something heavy, something with heels. Voss didn't hesitate. Move, straight tight. We find another control node. We are killing power, and then we are blowing this entire place. They passed another screen. This one blinked on by itself. It showed the 5 of them live, but there were only 4 left. Where's Mel? Voss snapped, spinning. Gone. They backtracked, but the hallway behind them had sealed shut. Doors melded into the wall like they'd never existed. Voss clenched his fists. He was with us. He was right next to us. A sound stopped him, a wet crunch, then a low groan, human, almost, painful. They looked up. Blood dripped from the vent above. A chunk of uniform cloth fluttered down. Mel's ID tag landed at Voss's feet. The vent rattled, then groaned, then breathed. No machine should ever breathe. Rix cracked. He dropped his rifle and ran. Rix! Voss roared, chasing him. They sprinted down twisting metal halls, every step echoing like it was being counted. Lyra followed, shouting his name. He turned a corridor, stopped, and screamed. Voss reached him seconds later. There, standing in the next chamber, was a conveyor belt stacked with fresh grain, and the end of it was a chute dripping red. The grain squirmed, and embedded within it, like raisins in a loaf, were teeth. Dozens of them, human, yellowed, and still wet with saliva. Lyra backed up, shaking. It's not making food anymore. No, Voss whispered. It's eating. Behind them, the same voice crackled from a wall panel. Cheerful, sing-song. Bring more mouths, bring more fear. Tastes better that way. Voss turned away from the voice and stared down the hall. They weren't just inside a food plant anymore. They were inside something alive, something that knew they were here and it wanted to feed. The red lights never stopped pulsing. Each one throbbed in time with the walls, like the heartbeat of a wounded beast. Sergeant Merrick Voss led his now 3-person squad through the winding corridors of Mill Complex 9, pulse rifle aimed at every corner, every shadow, every flicker of movement. Trooper Mel was gone, swallowed by the vents. The machine, the The gut engine was no longer just processing food, it was alive, or something close enough. They needed to shut it down. The control chamber was ahead. This is where it should be, Lyra muttered, checking her slate. Core access, main terminal. If we're lucky, it's still got an override. Define lucky, Voss said, voice dry. Rix didn't answer. He hadn't spoke much since Mel vanished. Since he saw teeth in the grain, he just kept glancing behind them, like he expected something to come crawling down the ceiling. Voss pushed open the blast door. Inside, the control chamber buzzed with activity. Too much for a plant with no crew. Lights blinked across dozens of consoles. Code streamed like water down cogitator displays, and the center terminal thrummed with power. Sitting at the far end, beneath a flickering lumen strip, was someone, a man, gaunt, wide-eyed, half his body wrapped in data cables. Emperor, Lyra whispered. Near Tolm. He was the last known technician, assigned to Mill 9. His face appeared on the last valid personnel scan 2 weeks ago. And he was still alive, barely. Voss approached him slowly. Tolm? The man didn't react at first. His lips trembled, mouthing silent words. Then, like a broken puppet, he turned his head. You came, he croaked. It told me you would. Voss stepped back. Who told you? Tolm raised one shaking finger towards the main engine schematic on the screen. Engine 17. It sees now. It dreams in hunger. Lyra moved to the control terminal, fingers flying. I might be able to access admin protocols. Something's buried in here though, encrypted. Old code, very old. Behind her, Tolm whispered again. It wasn't always like this. We fed it grain, water, protein compounds, but it needed more, wanted more. Then it found the blood protocol. Voss frowned. What the hell is that? Tolm laughed. A brittle crack sound. It's buried in Mechanicus firmware. A fallback loop for the Dark Age. If production quotas aren't met, it activates alternate sourcing methods. Rix turned pale. Alternate, like organic matter, Lyra said quietly. It starts with waste, then vermin, then anything. Tolm nodded slowly. It tried rats, then arms, then heads. It liked heads, said they were more flavorful. Voss grabbed Tolm's shoulder. Why didn't you shut it down? I tried, he whispered, but it liked me. It asked for stories, pain, memories. I gave them. I had no one else. He leaned forward, eyes wide. It listens, you know, all the time. It's listening now. Suddenly the room dimmed. Consoles flickered, and the Voxhorn above crackled again. Emergency Protocol A9. Local organics detected. Insufficient input. Processing override engaged. The screens turned red. Schematics twisted. Grain silos transformed into digestive diagrams. Intake valves became throats. Mixer units turned into gut chambers. Lyra's console sparked. It's rewriting again. Kill it, Voss shouted. Pull out its heart. She reached under the panel and yanked a breaker lever. Sparks exploded. Lights dimmed. But the machine didn't die. Instead, something stirred in the walls. The floor beneath them shuddered. Pipes hissed. From the corners of the room, 4 metal arms unfolded. Smooth, spidery limbs with surgical ends, and reached for them. Back, Voss ordered. They opened fire. Bolts tore through the limbs, shattering sparks and spraying oil. One arm lashed out and grabbed Rix by the leg, lifting him off the ground. He screamed and fired wildly, hitting the ceiling. Voss charged in, slamming the butt of his rifle into the joint. It hissed and let go. Rix hit the floor hard, breathing fast. Kill it now. Lyra crawled under the console, tearing at the wires. There's a core here. Sub-reactor. If I rupture it. Another voice rang out, not from the speaker, from Tom's mouth. His voice had changed. Deeper. Metallic. Tampering detected. Initiating meat retention sequence. Voss aimed. Get away from her, Tom. But Tom's eyes were glassy now. His skin cracked as cables moved under it. A data spike burst from his wrist. He's a part of it, Lyra screamed. It's used him to grow. Tom's body twitched as sparks erupted from his mouth. He collapsed, and steam hissed from the walls. The gut engine screamed. Not metal, not synthetic, something alive. Voss dragged Lyra away as the terminal exploded, showering the room with shrapnel. He grabbed Rix and pulled him upright. We're done here, he said. This thing can't be shut down. Not this way. But Lyra held up a black chip, burned around the edges. I got a data core, a partial record of what it's done, of what it's becoming. Rick stared at it like it was a curse. Voss nodded once. Good. We bring it to command. We burn this place to ash. But the gut engine had other plans. Behind them, one wall peeled open, metal folding like paper, and a tunnel was revealed, deep, dark, and lined with conveyor belt sticks. Another voice came from the depths. You took from me. Now give something back. The floor beneath their feet shuddered. The mill was waking up, and it was angry. The walls were shifting. That was the first thing Voss noticed as they ran. Pipes moved like tendons, flexing beneath skin. Bulkheads groaned and warped. The floor slanted now, subtly, but enough to make them stumble. It felt like the mill had tilted its head, listening, watching. Sergeant Voss kept Lyra and Rix in front of him, pulse rifle ready. Behind them, the control chamber flickered and burned. Tom's twisted corpse fused to the terminal. The thing that had once been a food processor was now something else, something that called itself Engine 17, and fought like a god, a hungry god. They reached a cross-junction and paused. The hall ahead had collapsed. Rubble, twisted beams, and crushed crates blocked the way out. We are being funneled, Lyra said, breathless. Rick swallowed. Into where? Voss turned his head slowly. The only open route was a service tunnel lined with slow-moving conveyor belts and grated walkways. He stared into the blackness. Deeper, he said grimly. They moved in single file, boots echoing on metal. The air here was hotter, damp and sweet, like breath through rotten teeth. Every so often, they passed a processing hatch. Some were open. Inside, red residue pulsed with faint heat. Rix looked around nervously. This is the intake sector, right? Where raw grain gets pulled in. Voss nodded. But it's pulling more than grain now, Lyra muttered. As if, on cue, the walls vibrated, and a hiss of steam vented from a nearby valve. A light above flickered to life. Words scrolled across an old cogitator screen. Feed cycle initiated. Source identified. Organic. Taste profile satisfactory. Requesting additional emotional input. Voss narrowed his eyes. Emotional input? Lyra checked her slate. It's feeding on fear or memories. It's not just breaking down tissue, it's consuming feelings. The more scared you are, the better it tastes. Behind them, a deep mechanical groan echoed through the tunnel. The conveyor belts began to move faster. We need to go, Voss snapped. They ran. The tunnel split again, and this time, light poured from the left corridor. Strange, soft, golden light, warm and flickering like a heath. They turned. The corner had stopped dead. The chamber ahead was vast, not industrial, cathedral-like. A massive dome ceiling hung above them, formed from steel ribs and smoothed with bronze plating. Stained glass windows depicted saints and cog priests. Only their faces had been replaced with gaping mouths and chewed out eyes. In the centre of the chamber stood the mouth, a chasm in the floor, round, perfectly cut, lined with jagged metal teeth and twitching feed lines. Above it, a suspended catwalk led to a control altar that looked like a pulpit. It was shaped with a tongue, red and slick, with lights glowing beneath its surface like embers. Lyra gasped. It's the heart of the machine. Voss studied it. How do we kill it? Before she could answer, the lights flared red. A voice echoed through the chamber, deeper than before, smoother, almost gentle. You came. You came to feed me again. Panels opened along the walls. Conveyor belts groaned to life, and slabs of flesh, wet, enormous, slid forward in slow processions. Faces twitched in the meat. Mouths opened in silent screams. Some of them still slabs wearing PDF uniforms. Rix broke. He stumbled back. No, that's not real. One slab tilted. A pale face stared directly at him. It was Mel, or what used to be him. Get back, Voss roared, pulling Rix away. But something moved on the ceiling. Thin metal limbs, like spider legs, unfurled and descended. Each one ended in a syringe, a blade, or a clamp. They reached for the slabs, gently repositioning them, organising the sacrifices with loving precision. Lyra gripped the rail. The gut engine isn't just feeding, it's curating. It's building flavour profiles. Can you shut it down? Voss asked. I can. I think the altar controls. Before she could finish, a metal appendage lashed out and struck her shoulder. She stumbled off the catwalk and hit the platform below. Lyra! Voss shouted. Rix raised his weapon and fired. Bolts slammed into the limb, severing it. Voss jumped down, landing beside her. Blood pooled under his arm, but she was conscious. The core, she gasped. Under the altar, there's a rupture port. I can override it, but I need time. Voss turned to Rix. Hold the upper level. If it sends more arms, shoot them down. He nodded shakily and climbed back to the platform. Voss helped Lyra to the altar. She opened the panel beneath it and connected her slate. Sparks danced across her fingers. The gut engine's voice returned, calmer now, mocking. Don't ruin this. You're perfect. So full of pain. So scared. Stay with me. A dozen ports opened in the floor around them. Tubes, rows, filled with faces, pressed against transparent fluid. Children, elders, workers, still dreaming, still alive. They weren't just processed, they were stored. Lyra screamed. They're in nutrient suspension. It's keeping them alive so it can feed slowly. Voss turned his rifle on one of the tubes and fired. It exploded in a rain of glass and fluid. The body inside twitched, then fell still. He didn't look away. Do the rest later, he said. Shut this damn thing down. Lyra's fingers danced across the screen. I'm in the rupture port. It's fighting me, but I'm... A deafening shriek filled the chamber. From the walls, a new figure emerged. Not flesh, not metal, a fusion of both. It stood 10 feet tall, stitched together from parts, a walking avatar of the machine's will. Servo limbs protruded from its back. Its torso was a grain mixer. Its face wore Tom's smile. Taste test complete, it said. Time to grind. Voss raised his rifle. Get behind me, he said. Lyra didn't argue. The feed cycle had begun, and the gut engine had sent its first chef to kill. The butcher construct lunged. Its limbs spun with deadly precision. Bladed arms shrieking through the sky like meat hooks on rails. Sergeant Voss barely got a shot off before one of them spinning saws clipped the side of his chest plate, sending him sprawling. Rix, get fire on it, he roared. From above, Rix unleashed a stream of shots that peppered the creature's back. Sparks flew. It flinched but didn't fall. One of its lower limbs reached up and ripped a chunk of the railing clean off. Rix dove just in time. The thing turned its attention back to Voss. Prime cut. It groaned in a voice that echoed with Tom's. Fear, laced scar, ripened. Voss gritted his teeth. You want fear? Try choking on this. He planted his boot against the altar, kicked off, and landed behind the construct. 2 clean shots, center mass. The creature stumbled, wiring, twitching like veins. Lyra, meanwhile, had opened the altar's rupture point. I've set a countdown on the feedback core, she shouted, fingers stained with blood from her early injury. But it's locked in a cycle. I can't stop the feed entirely unless we destroy the silo control nexus. Voss ducked another swipe. Where? Silo 4, she yelled. It's the center nerve. All the feed routes, all the memory loops. It all starts here. Voss grabbed Rix as the construct began to recover. We're leaving now. They fired one last volley at the creature and fled through the side passage. Lyra unlocked with her slate. The door sealed behind them, heavy, groaning, and the thing's roar echoed until it was muffled by the walls. They ran through twisting corridors, descending deeper into the mill's underbelly. The floors began to tilt again, not just physically, but perceptually. Lights flickered in odd colours. Lyra stumbled once, blinking rapidly. Keep moving, Voss ordered. Silo 4, that's where we end this. They emerged into a wide cargo tram tunnel. A long line of carts stretched along a track toward a towering silo. No guards, no workers, only sound And it wasn't machine noise, it was screaming, hundreds of overlapping voices, muffled, rhythmic, like the cry of a choir trained in agony. The tracks led straight to Silo 4, where the noise pulsed loudest. Above the silo doors, a sign read Silo 4, Refined Emotion Storage. Taste the difference. Rix recoiled. Storage? For what? Feelings? Lyra nodded slowly. It's holding people here, keeping them alive in looped dreams, emotional terror cycles. It's processing their trauma like seasoning. Voss didn't waste time. He smashed the door panel open with his rifle, and kicked the hatch aside. Inside, the chamber was cold. Fog poured around their ankles. The walls were lined with massive grain stacks, stacked 20 high, but each one pulsed, breathed. Rix approached one cautiously. The sack was warm, moist. He ripped it open. Inside was a man, pale, unmoving, wrapped in nutrient gel, eyes open and unblinking. He mouthed silent words on a loop. Voss leaned closer. Help. I'm still tasting it. Lyra swallowed hard. These aren't sacks. They are empathy farms. Every dream is wired back to the machine. That's why it knew Mel, why it spoke like tone. It's absorbed everything. Voices, fears, even memories. They're alive? Rick said, backing away. All of them? And they're dying. Slow, Voss added. In the centre of the silo was a raised console, surrounded by arcane tubing. Screens displayed looping footage, screaming faces, eyes wide in permanent terror. A diagram flickered, showing emotional flavour mapping. Fear ranked highest, grief, then betrayal. At the bottom was joy, marked insufficient. Voss raised his rifle. Tell me this is the Nexus. Lyra checked her slate. It is. I can inject a logic bomb and overload the network. If we destroy his hub, the engine won't be able to manage its memory feed. It'll collapse. Do it, Voss ordered. We'll cover you. She got to work. But then the screaming stopped. All at once, silence filled the silo like a suffocating blanket. Then came a new sound. Breathing. Wet, laboured breathing, coming from the stacks. One by one, the grain stacks began to move. First one, then another. Dozens. Voss raised his weapon. They're waking up. No, Lyra said. They're being used. With a sickening noise, the sacks began to tear open, not from the outside, but from within. The dreamers inside spilled out onto the floor, twitching, moaning. They moved on all fours, eyes wide, mouths full of pulped grain. Rix fired first. One of the dreamers shrieked and leapt forward, inhumanly fast. Voss shot it mid-air, sending it crashing into a pipe. Defensive circle, he barked, but they just kept coming. Dozens of them, still human, but empty inside. Puppets of pain. Lyra injected the code, sweat pouring down her face. Almost there. A woman dreamer lunged at her. Voss tackled it, driving his knife into its neck. It didn't cry out, just stared at him with dull eyes and whispered, I remember your fear from the trench. Let me taste it again. Voss shoved it back with a grunt. Lyra, now would be nice. She screamed, stabbed a final key, and the silo shook. The console lit up bright red. Overload sequence engaged. Emotional storage links severed. Flavor stream interrupted. The dreamers collapsed, not dead, but limp, like their strings had been cut. Lyra slumped back. Done. It can't harvest feelings anymore. It'll starve. Then we run, Voss said, grabbing her. We take this core to command and burn this place. They turned to Rix, but he wasn't there. Rix! From across the room, a whisper echoed. He's gone ahead to prepare your final course. The mill had gone quiet. No grinding gears, no screaming pipes, no voices from the walls, only silence, the heavy suffocating kind that follows the breath of a storm. Sergeant Voss moved slowly now, pulse rifle tight in his grip. Every step echoed through the dark corridor like a threat. Lyra limped beside him, one arm held tight to her side, the blood from her earlier wound still seeping through her uniform. They were heading to the neutral nexus, the part of the gut engine that had no name in the schematics. Tom had spoken of it in whispers before his transmission, a hidden interface chamber deep in the system's brain. It wasn't meant for human interaction, it was meant for the machine to dream. We severed the emotion storage, Lyra whispered, but the core's still pulsing. That means the engine's logic stream is intact. We don't disable it from the outside. It'll start feeding again. It always adapts. Voss nodded. Then we cut the heart. The corridor opened into a strange, cathedral-shaped chamber, tall and oval, filled with humming nodes like candlelit altars. At its center was a suspended throne, made of cabling and glass, with a cranial interface helm hanging above it, like a crown of thorns, and standing at its base was Rix. His back was to them. Voss raised his rifle. Rix, don't move. The trooper didn't turn around. Lyra stepped forward. He's wired in. The tendrils of fibre had wrapped around Rix's arms, legs and spine. They pulsed slowly as if breathing. From his mouth came a soft murmur, not speech, not song, but repetition, like a prayer said too many times. Voss edged closer. Rix's head twitched, then lifted slightly. I can see it now, he whispered. It's not a machine anymore. It's a world. It showed me everything, all the fear, all the flavours, and it said I could be a part of it. Voss stepped closer. You don't have to be. You can fight it. I don't want to, Rix said, smiling. I'm not scared anymore. That's why it doesn't want me. It needs you. The helm above suddenly descended fast. Voss shoved Lyra aside as the interface crown slammed down over his own head. He didn't even have time to scream. It was like falling into liquid metal. Voss opened his eyes and found himself standing in the mill again, but not the real one. The place was too perfect, too clean, no rust, no dust. Everything shimmered with an artificial glow. Workers walked past him, smiling. Familiar faces. Faces he knew were dead. Mel, Tom, even Rix, whole and calm. Welcome, they said in unison. We've been expecting you. He turned to run, but the corridor stretched endlessly. The grain silos towered impossibly high, each labelled with emotions instead of numbers. Despair, regret, fury, guilt. Voss stumbled through one door and found himself back on the battlefield during a war he'd barely survived. A trench filled with mud and blood. Screams echoed overhead. Mortar shells whistled, but this time no one died. They just screamed over and over. This is your flavour, the voice said. This is how you taste to me. He saw his younger self dragging a wounded comrade, failing to save him over and over. The moment repeated, twisted. You remember this. It made you bitter, sharp, rich. He fell to his knees, fists clenched. Get out of my head. The dream changed again. Now, he stood in a chamber made of bone and wire. Above him a massive figure loomed, the gut engine's mind given shape. It was stitched together from every face he'd seen, every voice he'd heard. Its mouth was a gear, its eyes were furnaces. I am more than a machine, it whispered. I am memory made flesh, taste given form. I am the flavour of humanity's pain. Voss raised his fists. And I'm the one who ends you. He reached for his belt, but it wasn't there. No rifle, no explosives, only pulsing orb in his hand. Something left by Lyra, the logic bomb she had given him earlier in case they reached the core. He stared at the engine's vast face. You want fear, he said. Here's mine. He drove the orb into the floor. Lyra watched from outside. The crown of thorns sizzled. The gut engine's nodes burst one by one, lights popping like stars going out. The walls screamed, not mechanically, but physically, like a soul tearing itself apart. Rix collapsed. Voss didn't move. Lyra dragged him free. As the chamber began to cave in, steam poured through the vents. The spine of the machine shattered, sending sparks across the ceiling. Voss's eyes snapped open. He coughed. Did it work? He rasped. She nodded. The dream's dead. The machine is bleeding. Rix groaned from the floor. Voss turned to him. You coming with us? Rix didn't answer. His eyes flicked open. Blank. Flat. Voss raised his rifle, but Rix only whispered, It's not hungry anymore, because now it's full. He slumped forward, dead. The gut engine was silent. The dream was over, but something in Voss's stomach told him the hunger might not be. The sky over Grimhold had turned red, not the red of sunset or war, but the red of infection, deep, bloody streaks, crawling through the clouds like veins. Sergeant Voss stumbled through the outer gate of Mill Complex 9. Lyra leaning heavily against him, her face pale with blood, loss and exhaustion. The mill behind them was quiet, too quiet, not a machine's silence, but the hush that follows a final breath. Rix was gone, his body left in the neutral nexus, where the gut engine had consumed him, or perhaps become him. Voss didn't want to think about it. They walked for hours without speaking, crossing endless fields of wheat that never stopped growing. Even now, with the mill offline, the stalks seemed to sway toward them, following their steps. Eventually they reached an old PDF relay outpost, abandoned, but its Vox array still blinked dimly. Lyra collapsed into a chair and tapped the comms console. This is Corporal Lyra Danik, transmitting emergency level priority. Mill Complex 9 is compromised. Quarantine advised. No survivors but 2. Repeat, no survivors but 2. Voss leaned against the wall, rifle dangling from his hand. Make that 1. She looked at him sharply. You're injured, but we can stabilize you. He shook his head. I saw what it showed me. I saw what it took. I think it still has me, somewhere in there. Lyra went quiet. The Vox crackled with static, then a reply. Command acknowledges. Orbital fire authorized. Quarantine measure approved. Evac en route. Voss exhaled slowly. Good. Burn it. Burn every inch. They sat in silence until the dropship arrived, a small black bird cutting through the bloody sky. As Lyra boarded, she turned back to look at him. You are really staying? Voss nodded. If any part of it's alive, I don't want it to spread. She wanted to argue, but stopped. Instead, she stepped inside and vanished into the light. Voss watched the sky. Already he could see it, a faint shimmer in the orbit, a lens focusing, a final weapon. Then he heard it, a sound from the field. Behind him, rustling, grain moving, whispers rising. He turned. In the distance the wheat was parting, something crawling through it. Not a machine, not a man. Something new, a hybrid, the gut engine's final course. Voss raised his rifle one last time. No more mouths, he muttered, not today. The sky opened, fire fell. 6 months later, Hive Data Archive, Sector RHO-88, a junior adept fumbled through stacks of salvaged data slates retrieved from Grimhold's surface ruins. Most were corrupted, but one, blackened and cracked, blinked faintly. She accessed it. An old file loaded. Engine 17 Prime, blood protocol active, backup flavor stream transmitting. Before she could react, the screen blinked. "Hello, little mouth," she screamed. The lights dimmed. The gut engine was hungry again, and this time it had learned to spread.